has been accompanied by controversy due to a toxic political environment, which often results in conflict and crisis. This leads to fragmentation of the nation and an ethnicity-driven propaganda which has had a negative influence on Kenyans. The need to stop the cycle motivated a strong focus on prevention and preventing the recurrence of electoral violence by various key stakeholders. During this electioneering period, information that was being received indicated an increased worry and tension in the country. This was worsened by misinformation and disinformation, especially through social media platforms. Interreligious Council of Kenya (IRCK), in partnership with various stakeholders and partners, took up the role of calling for peace, cohesion, countering hate speech, and strengthening mediation capacities of religious leaders before, during, and after the elections, and to address immediate and underlying causes of conflict and division through religious cooperation and action.
Kenya is a country of faith. Nearly everybody in this country, if not all the people of this country, are people of faith. This is enshrined in all our value systems, in our constitution, in our national anthem. Our national anthem begins with, O God, Lord of all creation, E Mungu nguvu yetu. The beginning chapter of our constitution begins with the acknowledging the supremacy of the Almighty God. And so religious leaders have a lot of important role in the lives of Kenyans. And so they're listened to. They have a convening power like nobody else. That's why they have had an important role to play in the elections, to call for peaceful elections before, during, and after the elections.
Since 2018, or rather after the general election of 2017, we came together after the elections and started the journey towards the elections 2022. And we tried to build scenarios, consult with experts who are so careful to see that we do not get back to the violence situation that we saw in 2007, 2008, and partly what happened in 2017.
From the very start, there was lots of research and analysis and hotspot mapping and risk mapping that was done by partners, either directly supported by the UN or supported by partners that we were working with. And there were quite a number of platforms that were created to do early warning, early response, including work on social media analysis and online mediation that was done through partners that we were working with.
IRCK convened stakeholder meetings including religious leaders that included clergy, women, and youth for scenario building across the counties for purposes of information synergy. They held community dialogues, town hall dialogues, conducted conflict scans, held interfaith prayers, and urged their congregants to elect leaders of good values as they called for peace, cohesion, and countering hate speech in the country. Interfaith Youth held an Interfaith Youth Week across the counties. Activities done during the Youth Week include performance arts, football tournaments, and other sports activities. They highlighted the youth agenda in the counties, and this culminated in a national youth convention where they highlighted their priority issues to leaders vying for political positions.
We were engaging with the youth across the country, and the youth were coming up with sporting events and charters and extravaganza across the counties, especially in the hotspot counties that were mapped out by various actors and institutions, including the NCIC.
Hawakushtushwa na risasi au kufungwa gerezani, nia yao ukombozi, kuvunja pingu za ukoloni. Naishi na tumaini, najitolea daima Kenya.
So the peace campaign, Let the Peace Win campaign, was at all levels, at the household level, targeting the youth, targeting the women, women as agents, telling them to restrain their youth and family members against being used in violence. The messaging of peace was across the country, amongst all our faith communities, in churches, in mosques, temples, by day and by night.
We used different platforms to call for peace messages as Interreligious Council of Kenya. We used our congregational platforms where we drafted messages, where religious leaders used it in different platforms in their pulpits, mosques and temples, where they called on to the youth to call for peace, to maintain peace before, during and after the elections. We also used digital platforms where we did social media campaigns, where we advocated for peace, we called for peace. We also used our interfaith youth to use these platforms to call for peace to the rest of their youth, and to also use the messages that were being created online on their own platforms to call to other networks within their platforms to call for peace.
Much before these elections, we prepared the booklet with the Muslims, Christians and Hindus, how to elect good leaders, that we have that confidence. They can lead us. We can increase our economy and decrease the poverty. So we have to take the values. Which leader have these values, the good values? Who can lead us in the world map, in a very good position in the world map? So that booklet is really helpful for the normal Pananchis. And much before these elections, we attended so many symposiums to how to conduct the peaceful elections. And we also disseminated peace messages.
We are, as a country, very religious, and our religious team, both the Christians and the Muslims, which are the major religious groups, played a very important role in their congregations, also preaching about peace. Many people attend religious ceremonies, and you can reach to many people. I believe that the faith one has in God, in Almighty, in an external power, contributes so much in giving one inner peace as an individual, and this culminates in the society's promotion of peace, and the country in the long run also benefits because everybody wants to promote peace and to have peace.
We also did short video clips for youth, which were aired in different radio stations, TV, especially the vernacular stations in areas that had been identified as hotspots, where we did vernacular messages. We called for peace, we called for youth not to be used during this period and to exercise peace. Because of these messages, we realized a lot of youth were eager to reach out to the other youth, which we believe contributed greatly to the peace in the country, which contributed greatly to the youth not being used for violent activities or being misused by political leaders to cause violence during this time.
There was no violence across the country, no incidences of violence before, during and after. And most importantly, our youth stayed away from violence.
We were particularly concerned of the misuse of the youth in previous elections, and most importantly, a certain team of the youth in the National Peace Mediation Team were also directly engaged with the youth. And we are proud and happy that it did work.
The youth are a very integral part in the mediation team, because most of the time the fingers all lie on them. They are the ones who are being used to cause chaos. They are the ones being used by the politicians. By bringing them on board, it will be easier for them to talk to fellow youths and bring sanity in the electoral process, and that is what happened. Most of the youth downed their tools and voted peacefully and went home to sleep.
IRCK facilitated gender monitors and observers training to help relay first-hand information on the election process from their respective counties. This training had over 300 observers and monitors who included women of faith, interfaith youth, clergy and media practitioners from the various counties. The monitors reported on any incidences to the IRCK Women's Situation Room by giving timely information and data concerning the election proceedings and incidences as they occurred in various counties.
The women mediation team came timely. As we all know, women were victims. But in today's times, the tables have turned. Women are victims and they are perpetrators. During this election time, we could see women being used by so many politicians, and the women themselves using themselves by affiliating themselves to so many different parties because of getting a 500 shilling or 200 shillings note. The women mediation team came to capacity build our women to know their right, to know why they are supposed to vote, and even to talk to the women aspirants and gauge their capability. We had 7 hotspot areas including Mombasa. That's why the women mediation team came about. It was high time women should come in and intervene, because we are affected if there is conflict. We are the losers when our husbands go to war, when our children go to war, because we have to join them.
Mediation and peace coexist, and like the Women Mediators Network, we identified this strength of women representation in the county committees, and we have trained them and used them in each county to have some training on mediation. So the peace committees have rounded women representatives who have strength in peacemaking and mediation.
I think it's high time the women mediation team goes the African way. Other countries need to come and copy from us. We set the pace, we set the trend. UNSCR 1325 came with a resolution, more women in peace building. As you all know, peace building and mediation go hand in hand. The Kenya Women Mediation Team has proven that women can resolve conflict by dialogue only.
The IRCK Women's Situation Room, which was launched on the 28th July 2022 in Nakuru County and was operational from the 8th August 2022.
We had a situation room in which we're also responding to incidences, whether violence against women or any sorts of trouble anywhere, and linked up with the police, linked up with NCIC.
The women's situation during the 2022 general election objective was to increase the participation of women in electoral processes and mitigate violence against women in elections, among other GBV-related issues.
We did a lot actually on the situation room, whereby we were making calls and receiving calls across the country, whereby we involved both men, women, and the youth. As our sister said, the name women represent even the men. So when we called actually across the country, we were able to serve the whole nation. Not only the women, but the men and the youth as well.
It hosted the IRCK panel of eminent women leaders and the National Peace and Mediation Team. The initiative was to synergize the efforts and information received from the IRCK interfaith networks across the country, including Youth Interfaith Networks and Women Interfaith Network. The Interreligious Council of Kenya, IRCK, in collaboration with key partners, strengthened the mediation capacity and coordination of existing efforts through the establishment of a National Peace and Mediation Team.
The good thing that happened to us, and we thank God for that, is the public, trust on us has been over 80% in this country. So we took that and ran away with it and bonded as religious leaders, came together, began to walk this journey with the Kenyans on and on, issuing statements of peace. And at some point before the elections, we came up with the National Peace and Mediation Team.
IRCK, who have been in this field for many, many years in promoting and maintaining peace and togetherness in this country, identified these eminent men and women of Kenya to form the National Peace and Mediation Team.
The idea of forming this national team originated from the Interfaith Council of Kenya. And Interfaith Council of Kenya, IRCK, is a national body with networks throughout the country.
We formed the National Peace and Mediation Team that really worked to visit different places in the country like Lamu, Isiolo and Nakuru, which were very volatile hotspots, and we contained the situation up to when the elections came.
The national mediation team was a team that was put together comprising a broad spectrum of stakeholders and actors, peace actors, key amongst them being religious leaders from all the faiths within IRCK. And IRCK hosted the secretariat that was coordinating the National Peace and Mediation team. But there are also other actors, people in business, civil society organizations, sports. For example, you have the sports lady, Tegla Lorupe amongst them, representing that fraternity. There were women, the people from the media. You had Wilfred Kiboro, for example, Nation Media Group chairman.
We brought people or personalities from different sectors. We had the Council of Elders. We had the eminent women. We had every other. We chose across board a good number of representatives from very sensitive institutions that came and worked with the religious leadership.
That's why it was called Peace and Mediation Team, to preach and message the word of peace for the elections before, during and after, to commit this country to a peaceful election. Basically the messaging being, let's have peaceful elections, and if there are any disputes arising from the elections, let's have them resolved through peaceful means, constitutional and legal means. And let's not do it through the streets, but through the courtrooms to seek redress. That's the aspect of peace. And the second aspect was issues of mediation in case of any conflict.
The National Peace and Mediation Team played a very vital role in creating awareness, peace, and the importance of Kenyans being mature enough to take whatever results will be declared and follow the law.
There was another positive benefit which I cannot ignore: the diversity of the people involved. The team in the National Peace and Mediation Team was made of people from different backgrounds, but involved in the peace missions. Like I come from the elders' point of view. Occasionally there would befall a situation which the team felt was best handled by the elders. So they will get the advantage of my being involved to organize and call the members of my association for action. There were visible interventions, the press release which were made, the visit to the IBC, visit to the bombers on the Taring Hall. They were made look like it was one person who was doing it. So the interest of the country was the foremost, and it is all coordination by the National Peace and Mediation Team. We give a definite advantage to the Inter-Religious Council, because their group, although diverse, you have the Catholic, you have the churches there, the Christians, the mainstream, the Catholic IRCK group. Then you have the African-based faith, which is another group. We have the Muslims, you have the Hindus, and all those people. They have a history of working together in the mediation. And where we found that we have an advantage, we'll give that one to them, because their faith. They have worked with most of those people involved. They had worked with the Raila, they had worked with the Ruto, they had worked with the Uhuru. So they are familiar grounds.
The National Peace and Mediation Team, in close collaboration with the Women's Mediation Network, supported in collaboration with UN Women, undertook prevention and rapid response activities at the national level and in Lamu, Wajir, Nakuru and Isiolo counties, which had been identified as hotspot counties. The team comprised of eminent Kenyans drawn from the diverse sectors and initiatives, both state and non-state actors representing different regions and sectors of the Kenyan population, brought together by common interest of securing Kenya, worked with political actors and key electoral institutions that are charged with managing elections to ensure that any arising disputes were amicably resolved in a way that promoted peace, justice, and civil rights in Kenya. WIANO, being a multi-stakeholder structure comprised of strategic state and non-state institutions working on electoral violence reduction, was strategic in spreading messages that counter hate speech and incitement to violence.
We, at the National Peace and Mediation Team, had over 300 election observers all over the country. We also had the opportunity to include the eminent women under the Situation Room who were very active in monitoring injustice or violence against the women during these time elections.
After the 2022 general elections, the presidential elections were disputed by the Azimio coalition, who lost to the Kenya Kwanza coalition, and as a result, presented the case to the Supreme Court.
During the very last phase of the elections, when we were at Bomas, the National Tallying Center, the situation was almost getting out of hand, and the mediators who were present at the National Tallying Center were able to calm the situation.
As a servant of God, I feel more comfortable when people live in peace. I tell you for free, it was not a walk in the park. It was not easy, especially when we got to the tail end where everything was almost getting, bitter, emotive, and everybody was like for themselves. There are moments when you feel like everybody wants to run away from you. You have to tell people, please hold, keep holding, especially when we went to Bomas. Probably, I think you saw what happened. People want to run away from you and you're telling them, no, let's hold on, let's stay on. This is our country. If it burns, let's burn with it now and let's hold. This is the moment we are called for. We have to hold, we have to keep on and on and on until the last minute. And I thank the religious leadership. Believe you me, if it was not for their standing strong, this country would have gone to the dung. Allow me to appreciate and thank them and pray that religious leaders will still continue to stand in the gap to the last minute.
There was a lot of fear of violence during the elections, and the kind of social media discussions that were going on were indicating that the situation was not good.
As that was going on, basically, what was also happening was a continuous situation analysis where technical arm of the National Peace and Mediation Team was collecting data and information about the peace and security situation in the country.
Various surveys that were carried out, for example, by Amnesty International and by other partners like South Consulting and the hotspot mapping, many of these indicated a sense of fear of violence during the elections. And this escalated especially during the period after the announcement of results. There are a number of interventions that we took to measure that, and the most significant I could say was the social media analysis. And this is the kind of predictive analysis that we did to check whether the levels of fear were increasing or decreasing depending on what people were saying. And that program also looked at the linkage between what was being said on social media and what was being said outside social media. Looking at those two spaces and the kinds of discussions, some that were heading, predicting violence and others that were predicting a peaceful transition, we were able to judge fairly well that the situation might have some flashpoints, but it was not going to be a widespread kind of violence.
That is the information now that informed the decision of the team. From that now, the team had to develop strategies on how it could engage in its work. For example, to use shuttle diplomacy.
After the pronouncement of the elections by the IEBC, you saw what happened at Bomas. Before the pronouncement, it was a bit chaotic. We tried to manage ourselves as religious leaders, and we stood by the electoral body. And then after we had dispersed, we knew there were people who felt that justice was not done, and they had their own expectations. And then therefore we had to now do the shuttle diplomacy.
And one of the most important footprints of the National Peace and Mediation Team, religious leaders playing an important role in it, was to do shuttle diplomacy to the contestants and anybody who was key in the electoral process.
We came up with a strategy where we divided ourselves into groups and visited the different leaders or the leadership of the different parties.
For example, visiting the two contestants, the former Prime Minister, the Honorable Raila Odinga, in his home and having pastoral care and basically encouraging him to continue on the path of peace, to seek truth and justice. And also the current president, who was also a contestant, to also do pastoral care with him and urge him to be magnanimous and restrained in celebrating the win. And former president as well, Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta, also urging him for the transition. And also IBC, to encourage them to stay the course and giving confidence to the IBC to do an election that is free, fair, credible and transparent, that reflects the will of the people. Even when they had a challenge, the commission was split. We also did a shuttle diplomacy under the NPMT. But we also interacted with diplomats from the international community and telling them to work with Kenya and support Kenya.
We are humbled that even though up to now healing does not happen in a day, we are still working with those that did not achieve what they intended, and because they are part of our congregation, and also working with those that won. But we continue to warn to advise those that won, not to celebrate in a manner that will provoke or cause others to feel, bitter or emotive, but celebrate with humility and, serve Kenyans, whether they voted them in or whether they were in their party or not. Let them serve, the citizenry as their leaders and servants today.
The emphasis of the shuttle diplomacy was peace premised on the pursuit of truth and justice for all within the confines of the Constitution and law, and amalgamity, taking into consideration that Kenyans were the most important aspects of this discourse. Mediation efforts by the religious leaders were instrumental in holding the country together before, during and after the elections.
The mediation process is not a one-off event. One needs to begin early sensitizing the citizenry on the importance of peace.
In the post-election period, continuous mediation is needed to promote political reconciliation and address intercommunal tensions that emerged during the political campaigns and grievances over long-standing issues in areas mapped as hotspots. IRCK continues to partner with strategic partners to call and ensure there is peace and cohesion in the country. Religious leaders continue to engage and establish collaboration and stronger partnerships to ensure better understanding and enhanced coordination of peace actors at national and country levels. Provide an opportunity for individuals, organizations to promote peace and enhance trust between the community and security agencies.
As Hindus, we believe in peace. Even every prayer, we say Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. That means peace, peace. Peace is the fundamental for anything.
The get-together of the religious leader from different congregation, from different faith, to show Kenyans that we are one as Kenyans. And I'm sure all would appreciate this is the first time in the country's history that the voting did not go as per ethnic or religious base. It went on into the issues and manifestos of the candidates. I'm a businessman. I run some companies. It gives me a lot of peace that I was able to participate and contributed my time and efforts in bringing peace to our fellow Kenyans. As if I did not make my effort to bring peace, I may not have a business to enjoy. Neither would I have the opportunity to enjoy the profits which I'll be making by business. And this is my message to our fellow Kenyans. We are Kenyans and we need to maintain peace and love.
Communication played a big role. I believe that what we need to do even after the elections are done, messages different platforms should be still be used to call for peace, to call for youth now to start exercising their democratic right. They can still use the same platforms to call for accountability of their leaders and to hold them accountable, and to still call for peace even as we progress during this post-election period.
And allow me to take this moment to appreciate the religious leadership for standing firm even when the wave was very, very high and strong, and saying no to any violence, no to compromise, no to anything that would cause us to live in disharmony as a country. I would urge that even as countries go to elections, they collaborate and network with like-minded groups.
You know, if you compare with 2007 and 1992, 1998, now these elections are much, much better than the previous elections. So we are showing the maturity, and the people are appreciating in this African continent. They are taking the Kenya as an example.
And I think the thinking of the Kenyans this time, including these eminent people who formed the team, was that we may not need another Kofi Annan to come to this country when we can have our own sons and daughters who can do our mediation. And that is where we're heading to, and that's an aspect of sustainability. We learned a lesson, and now we should take care of our affairs.
That's a good lesson. And many countries, the African Union and the international observers who were there, including even Western diplomats, they said these are very good lessons other countries to learn from Kenya. We should be proud as a community of Kenyans, regardless of where we stand on the political platform.
I would want to propose to any countries, particularly in Africa, that would have elections to take a leaf from what we did in Kenya during our 2022 elections, which for me were very successful because it was peaceful, and we need to emulate this in the whole continent. Politics is a game that ends, but we should preserve peace and life. No one should die because of a political seat.
We are grateful to our partners like the United Nations, Ford Foundation, some foreign mission, and some religious-based organization who helped us and sponsored our activities throughout the country. And it is indeed these efforts by these partners and friends to the country helped us achieve what we wanted to achieve.
I will conclude with that saying of Nelson Mandela, where he said, if you talk to a man in a language that he understands, that goes to his mind. But if you talk to a man, or the same person, in his language, that goes to his heart.